Hey, this is Eric with the Sign Industry Podcast. How's it going out there? Sign Industry Podcast brought to you by Van Ladder and Signs of the Times Magazine. Today, we have a special guest, a person with the absolute coolest name in the sign industry, Mars Bravo. Hey, Mars, how are you doing?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for asking. How's everything on your side of the...
I can't complain. Okay. I'm still upright. So, before we go any further and get into the sign industry stuff, how do you get the name Mars Bravo?
Well, sometimes you're just like a born rock star and you get stuck with it. But
really cool.
Story short, when I was in my punk rock teenage years, I was in an all-girl band, and we used to write original music, but we used to also cover some songs. But we were really punk rock. We were really angsty. We were just, teenage against, society and rules and stuff. So we would get on stage and rock our little hearts out. And if you're familiar with punk rock music, there's not too much singing. There's more like yelling and screaming. And so when I would be doing some of the screaming and yelling or whatever, I would get really, really red, and like you can see the veins popping from my neck. And so I had a few friends start calling me Mars Attacks. And it sort of stuck as a stage name. And so I was maybe 13, 14 years old at the time. And ever since then, Mars Bravo was born.
Oh, that's very cool.
And so I went ahead and that became my name. And even though it was a nickname at first, but I stayed with it. And now that I'm in the sign industry, it's just worked to my benefit every single way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something you don't forget. I have a hard time remembering names, but
I know, right?
Yours is like, Mars Bravo. I know her,
Yeah. And so when I went on my own to start my own company, I was trying to come up with company names, and I'm trying to be sort of witty with it, or some sort of pun intended situation. And Signs for Mars was perfect, because when people don't know me and they don't know that I'm like the one behind sort of everything happening, they first think of the planet, right? So like Signs from Mars, from like out of this planet, from another planet. And then they meet me and they go, "Wait, you're Mars?" And so then they put one and two together, and it's always really funny to see that reaction. It does not get old.
That's great. Yeah, it's definitely gets people's attention. There's no doubt about it. So how did you get into the sign industry? How does Mars go from punk rock yelling and screaming, banging a guitar on stage to I'm a sign person? How'd you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I think the main reason was growing up, right? Adulting, like having to find a job. And it's like, oh man, I can't just hang out with my friends forever and make a living that way. And so I went ahead and I was studying graphic design and illustration after high school. But my entire life I've been really attracted to the creative realm of things: drawing, painting, designing, and writing music and things like that. And so when I officially was like, okay, I need to get a job, I'm an adult. I did do some graphic design gigs. And it was nothing like when I was in school. When I was in school, it was so much fun. We were putting in like 12, 16-hour days in the studio. You're with your friends.
It's a party.
Being creative. Yeah, you're being creative. You're looking at everybody else's work. Like, you're constantly inspired. And then you get a job and you sit at a desk and somebody's telling you basically, like, put that there, use this, like make that bigger, and you're like stripped down from your creativity, and like it just wasn't what I thought it would be. And so I took a huge risk because I was not happy with that job, even though it was really well-paying job. It just to me wasn't something that I just it got to the point where I was like having trouble waking up in the morning kind of thing.
Oh boy.
And so
Yeah.
I took a huge risk and I just quit. And everybody was like, how can you quit a job? You have nothing lined up. And I was like, yeah, I kind of didn't really think that through. So I applied to a bunch of different places, hoping that maybe it was just that company that I wasn't happy with. But in doing so, I stumbled on a sign company. And I've told this story before where I basically drove into an alley.
Uh-oh.
And
Hey, you got a
then
job? You
you
got
know,
a
I'm
job?
like yeah, the GPS was like, you've arrived, to your job interview
Yeah.
destination. And I was like, well, this is either where I die or where I get a job. And somebody actually pulls this rolling gate open, and then the first thing I saw was the parking lot.
This is getting
Yeah,
worse. It's getting
I
bad.
know. So the first thing I see is a parking lot of bucket trucks like parked.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know what those were at the time. I mean, I've seen them like around for like people fixing the electrical and stuff, but they were wrapped in the company's logo, and I didn't know what it was going on or where I was. And then they walked me through, and then I saw this big open space where somebody was painting this 10-foot letter. And I
Ah,
was like, whoa, like I immediately was like,
gotcha.
where am I? Like, what is going on here? And so they walked me through like the office, and all the people designing, and then there was like the sales section, and there was plotters. Like it was just very alive, and I was like completely amazed and hypnotized by it all.
Hmm.
And it was in that moment that I realized this is exactly what I want to do.
That's cool.
And it was so cool. Like I still feel that feeling. And
Hmm.
it just once you can capture that feeling, like it's so fun to be in the sign industry. So I went through my share of sign companies that I worked for, and I learned a lot, and I had my situations, as you can, you're aware how things can play out from time to
Hmm.
time, and differences between people. And especially when you're learning and you're trying to continue to level up, and then you get too good at something that people want to keep you in that position because you just got too good at that. But
Oh
you're
yeah.
like, no, I want to learn more.
I got to get
So
bigger. Yep.
yeah, so it,
Hmm.
it eventually led to me just making that another risk, another decision of saying, you know what, if I'm gonna continue to grow and find my path, like I just gotta do it out of my own account, because
Exactly.
in that way nobody can stop me, and I'm not being held responsible to fulfill a specific role.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of like the main reason why I was like, well, let's go and see what can happen. Uh, and here I am. Like it's been like 9-10 years since that day that I drove into that alley.
Wow.
I
That's
know.
so cool. I
I know, time flies.
the one question I ask everybody on the show is, do you love your job? Apparently you love your job.
Oh, I'm obsessed. Like it's like I'm obsessed. It's crazy how much I love sign making, the sign industry, designing, especially designing, for signage is
Hmm.
it's so unique. Even oh, I am so sorry, my phone is just like even designing for before as a graphic designer, and having to learn to design for sign making for things to be made. It was a complete like learning curve,
Hmm.
and so sure, it helped that I had the design background, but it was still very different. And I feel like that's not very spoken about, or like we don't really have like a place where we can learn those things
Right.
nowadays. So I was lucky enough to have people that were really graceful and supportive of me learning, but at the same time I did have to do a lot of research and work, and reach out to people and then just learn different equipments and different materials so that I can see how things are being put together and how you can design, and that way you can expand your design knowledge too.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the sign industry. I often call it the redheaded stepchild of the construction industry.
Oh, okay.
Because
Tell me
nobody know,
more.
yeah, nobody knows who we are. We just kind of are there, but yet they need us, you know. They
Right?
If you don't have the sign person, you the rest of it doesn't count because nobody
It
knows what
is
this
so
building is,
funny.
you know.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And that you say that, because it's like, can you imagine a world where like we wake up tomorrow and there's just no signs?
Yeah.
Like nobody would know where to go, what
Hmm.
to do, like where
Inter
anything is.
Interesting fact. You know how you go to England and you'll just start walking down the street and you'll see a pub called the Greek Goat or the Pagan Swirl or whatever you see. The reason that they called them those names back then is because when they back in the 1600s and all that other stuff, uh people couldn't read, but they could see and they could
Oh,
understand that's a pig, that's a goat,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
green, and that's how
Oh
they
my God, I
found,
love that fact.
yeah, that's how they
Ah,
found different places. So
I love that.
yeah, not to mention you go to Machu Picchu and all that other stuff, you'll see, signs. I mean, the
Hmm.
sign
Yeah.
people, that's why I call the sign industry the second oldest profession on the planet. So,
What's the first?
well, I think we all know that. But somebody
Yeah.
needed a sign. So,
That is true. And
the,
even to your fun fact, like having images or icons to communicate something is very interesting, because we can think that, from what we found, right, like in like the like Egyptians, for example, they used a lot of symbolism
mhm.
to communicate, right? And so I would consider that a sign, right? Because like you said, like people didn't know how to read, and then there was like different levels, right, of IQ levels, so to speak. And so now, that we use emojis and stuff like that to express ourselves through text, right?
Mhm.
But I've noticed that now those are being used in science too, to
Oh
sort of
yeah.
have that same. And so it still sort of sticks around, right? Like the symbolism is a way to communicate still very much in science.
Mhm. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
the Romans actually used the first wayfinding system.
Yeah.
Because if you were going down a Roman road and you could
Yeah.
go right or you could go left, they wanted to make sure you got to the city so you could pay your taxes or whatever. So,
Right.
they
Right.
let you know, go this way. Yeah. So it's funny what you said about the sign industry and being creative and ratcheting up levels.
Hmm.
Um, because I found before I started my own company, well, I started my own company when I was 14, but then I went to work for other companies because I had to learn, I had to learn this
Yeah.
stuff. So, but when I got done working for the other companies, I got to a point to where I was doing sign design and I just wasn't getting cooperation because I was designing stuff that they were like, "How are we going to build this? We can't do that."
Hmm.
And it just got
Hmm.
to the point to where I'm like, "Okay, fine. I'm just going to start my own company and just design what I want and build what
I
I want."
see.
So
Yeah.
I can see where that
Let
something
there
fell
be
off the
light.
wall back there. So I can see where you came from, it's saying you just had to be more creative. You had to get to that next level.
Right. Well, it is interesting when you have a vision
Hmm.
that you believe in. And sure, maybe it's not something a lot of people are used to doing. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's impossible. Like, yeah, so it'll take a little bit more work to figure out, and even testing it, right? To see. when you fabricate something that is unusual or that you came up with and sort of engineered,
Mm-hmm.
we're really just experimenting at that point. And I know, once you have a business and once you have responsibilities and clients and insurances, and like once all these other factors start to play in,
Mm-hmm.
it does sort of make you think twice, right? Should I be this creative? Should I be this experimental? Should I be, and a lot of the time people get sort of caught up in that and they say, no, I just found what works and I'm going to stick to that. And that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which that's good. But then we also need people like you and myself who are constantly curious, because we need to keep sort of the industry, on its toes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what could happen? Maybe it
Yeah.
does work, and
Gotta
then we
push
can
the
teach other
boundary.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's so cool that so the company that you started when you say you were 14.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what were you doing
I was hand
at such
lettering
a young?
boats.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, I was hand lettering boats and pinstriping dragsters.
Wow.
For people. Yeah, it's a long story, and I'm sure people have heard it before. But
Yeah.
yeah, I actually started when I was 12. I was an apprentice for 2 years. The guy I was an apprentice under passed away, and then I was having fun doing what I was doing. So my dad said,
Yeah.
"Well, just clear out the garage. Let's turn that into a sign shop." I'm like, "Oh,
That's
cool."
so
So that's
cool.
what I ended up doing. Hey,
That's so
we're
cool.
gonna take a break right now, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about how you mix the old school into the new school, since we're kind of
Yeah.
talking about materials and all that. How's that?
Let's do it. Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds really good.
All right. This is Eric with the Sign Industry Podcast. We'll be right back after this word from Van Ladder.
The Van Ladder Bucket Truck simplifies your sign installation and service work. A winner of the ISA's Innovation Award, Chariot Bucket has a rotating fork system with an assortment of super useful accessories, giving you an extra set of hands at the job site. And with 6 different outside compartments and a huge project area inside, the Workport box is a traveling warehouse. No more running for parts. Finally, all-electric Van Ladder operates without the vehicle running, giving you a quiet day's work without stinky fumes. You can check it out at www.vanladder.com.
Hey, this is Eric with the Sign Industry Podcast, and I'm here live. Well, it's recorded. I'm recording it. I'm live with her. Mars Bravo out of Los Angeles, California. Before we went to the break, we were talking about how you like to intermingle different materials. What's the different materials and techniques that you like to kind of mix up?
So for designing in terms of like production ready files, I still do that digitally through the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll generate like AI files or EPS files so that they can be used to be used for CNC routers or laser cutters or whatever it may be. But I'd like to implement some hand-drawn stuff in there, even if I start with hand drawing and then vectorizing.
Mm-hmm.
I found that it still sustains a lot of that organic nature to it
There's a feel to it
versus,
there's a feeling to, sorry to interrupt, but there's a feeling to it
yeah,
when you actually draw it.
yeah.
You're putting
And
something into it.
yeah, and to me it's very obvious, and it's really fun. And I sort of picked that up from a professor that I had in a typography class that I had to take in college, where he would have us do practice our typography, and then he would have us get a tracing paper and then do it again with a different marker or different type of pen,
Mm-hmm.
and then do it again. Like you keep layering tracing paper, and you keep trying different pens and markers, and see how it starts. And then you put them side by side, and you can see how they begin to transform. But they, every single time, even though you're making essentially copies of this,
Mm-hmm.
it sustains that organic look and feeling. And because I was kind of like in the cusp of analog and digital uh, transition
Mm-hmm.
happening, like in schools and like life, I was basically the last class that had typography, that we did half the semester uh, by hand, and then the other half of the semester we had to learn to design our own font on the computer so
Oh
that you can
wow.
actually like use it and type with it. And that was really cool. And then same thing for photography. We did have photography for analog, where we would develop our own film, and then we had to do the last half of the semester using digital cameras. And so I was like in that cusp of the transitional area where people were having to teach a little bit of the analog and then move into digital. And I think that's why I'm so influenced by doing things both ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm like, I just kind of got stuck in that in between weird transition where people were trying to learn the technology that was taking over, but we're also holding on to what we've known. And so now I do that a lot in my work, and it just every single time, like it's just so fun. Like I recently did some designed some plaques for the ISA, and for one of them, I took leaves that from the backyard and I made stamps with them,
Oh,
with
cool.
just acrylic paint on them, and I just stamp them on a piece of paper to try to get all those veins and all those details that the leaves have.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to actually digitize those and vectorize them so that they can get engraved on aluminum, like as a plaque. And they turned out so good. And what's cool about it is that I can either enlarge or shrink the file without losing the quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can make big leaves or small leaves, and have them made out of any material really.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like something that I still just go back to a lot. It's like the basics, right? Especially when I'm feeling a little bit uninspired or overwhelmed, I just go back to the basics. Like, sometimes I'm like sitting at
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
computer trying to come up with something and nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'll just get a pen and start drawing instead, and then I mix and match.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where my style sort of came from.
Yeah. I've always got uh a sketch pad within arm's reach because
Yeah.
I just never know what's going to happen. No matter where I'm at, it doesn't matter. I mean, I can be sitting at a restaurant and be like, "Oh yeah," and take
Yeah.
off on it. I, it's funny that you say you got to get away from the computer. A lot of people don't realize that's a big thing. You got to get away from the technology to get the creative juices flowing because staring at a screen all day is just like bleh,
Yeah.
the part of the fun of being creative is finding an environment to be creative in, I guess you'd say. um
Yes, I agree.
yeah, a lot of times I'll grab a cigar and head out to my burn pit and just sit there with a small glass of rum and you know
Oh,
and
nice.
i've
That's the
I've come
life.
up with some
So I
really
got to
cool
get to your
stuff.
level.
I've come up with some really cool stuff. So matter of fact,
I'm over here like drinking my coffee,
yeah.
I got to get in your level.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I'm working on a project right now. It's called the Little Arts Theater in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And I was just there last week. And the theater board says, okay, we want Aztec and Art Deco.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
like, okay, yeah, those two go together. So, but I tell you,
I mean,
sitting
that's a challenge.
it is, but sitting at the fire last night, they got it all figured out. So it's
Nice.
yeah, it's looking cool.
That's awesome.
I
I'm
hand drew
stoked to
everything
see
now
that.
and yeah, I hand drew it all. Now I'm switching it over to I'm vector filing it now. So
Okay, yeah.
something else that you do is I was reading in the article from January Signs of the Times.
Uh-huh.
Um you like something about getting younger people into the sign industry? Um
Yeah, so that's kind of been in the back of my head since I sort of got into the industry, because obviously I mean this like with all the respect in the world, but I couldn't really find people like me that were A, willing to help me or teach me, or like B, were even like interested
Hmm.
in what I'm so obsessed with now. And so so then I thought, well, I how could I be the person who I needed when I was starting in the sign industry, and be that sort of not necessarily support, but like just like that door to for other people to walk into, you know,
Yeah, a
that
mentor.
that shady alley with all the cool stuff behind that gate. So
That's
so
hilarious.
yeah, so I'm really interested in finding a way to maybe create like some type of sign academy where, you know, we can show people or that are younger, that are either coming out straight out of college, or that, you know, it, because what we do is essentially like a trade, right?
Hmm.
But there isn't like a place where you can go and learn this stuff. A lot of people get lucky and they go into their family's business, right?
Right.
That's been going on forever. And then some people are like me, where you just sort of stumbled upon it, and that's just kind of what happened. But I think it's really important that we teach it, because with technology, things are changing.
Hmm.
And so not everything, like we're talking about, not everything is being done the old school way, even though some things still are. And not everything's being done the new school way. And so we can find like a happy middle ground where it's interesting enough for younger people to want to do this, but also exciting enough for seasoned sign makers that would want to teach it,
Right.
right? So
Hmm.
that you feel like, yeah, this is actually working. Because I know a lot of people maybe feel like they either, you know, don't want to teach because they, I don't know, they feel like they learned the hard way, so they don't want to soften up. Or maybe they just feel like nobody's interested, because I get that feeling too. Like when I speak to people who are not in the industry, and I realize I'm like info dumping, and then I can see I'm losing them, and I'm like, oh, like not everybody's as excited.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, finding a way where it's a place where it can be like a creative, interactive um area where you know, like have like sort of like the basics, right? Like I know hand lettering is making a comeback,
Hmm.
but I also know that there's a lot of great cool things you can do with vinyl.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's a lot of skill that it requires to learn to apply it, and to play with it, and to know the materials, how they stretch and how they, you know. So there's every little part of the sign industry has its own um, elements and their its own skill set that it's required. So I think it would be really cool for us to have some type of school where you can kind of see all those departments, and also choose like which one attracts you the most, you
There you
know?
go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd see.
Yeah.
I've thought about this a long time myself. Matter of fact, I got three. I taught an art class for a long time, just
Hmm.
for fun, for 10 years. And three,
You were having you're
it was
having a lot of
fun.
fun there.
Yeah. So but three of the kids that were in there had that you looked at them, you're like, that kid needs a job because they need a place to be creative. They're not going to go to school
Hmm.
because they're not interested in it. They've got
Hmm.
books like this that's just full of scribbles.
Yeah.
And so I took each one of those kids and I took them to a local sign company and I said, "Hey, this is Josh, this is Ann, this is, Danielle." And we let them loose in the sign shop for a day just to go watch
Yeah.
everybody. And then each of them picked a place that they liked
Oh, no way.
in there,
That's so cool.
and then we actually worked with them for a week to
Hmm.
get them into it. That summer, the sign company hired them to actually work there, and now all three of them still work there. And that
No
was
way.
that
Oh my
was
gosh, what a
12, 13 years ago.
oh man,
Yeah,
that is such a cool story.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So
can see where we could have like a sign academy. And we
Yep.
could even do it online, like YouTube or something like
Yeah,
that.
we can start
Yeah,
there.
you could
Yeah.
be
Um,
Professor Mars. I can see that, you know.
and then when you were talking about how, that kid had just like a bunch of sketches, right?
Oh yeah.
Or was I sometimes too when I'm driving down the freeway and I see like graffiti people tagging on the freeway, like
Hmm.
hanging on these bridges and
Yeah.
stuff, I always think, man, those guys would make really good
Sign
installers.
guys, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, we need to get them installing some signs because they're not afraid of heights. They're
Nope.
up there, like they're not even, no OSHA approved nothing, and they're getting it done.
Yeah. I mean, and some of them do some really good work too. You
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at the time. I'm like, oh, listen, I've got to cut it short because, any more than 20, 30 minutes in a podcast, people are like, although this one
yeah.
I don't think so because it's been very interesting. I would like to have you come back in the fall if you don't mind and
Of
do kind of
course.
an update and we can talk
Yeah,
more about stuff. And also I'd like to get with you about, this sign academy idea if possible.
yeah,
Um
yeah.
because that's something that could happen. I mean, YouTube
I
is wide open with stuff
Yep.
and I'm sure we could find sponsors to do something.
I
So,
agree with you. I
yeah.
recently wrote all my thoughts down on paper, which took me probably a whole year. I was carrying these ideas in my head
Hmm.
until recently after the ISA. I came home and I was like, man, this is getting heavy. I need to get it out. So I wrote, everything down and I did a little plan and everything. So I'm really hoping that I can start focusing my attention in that direction,
Good.
even though I still love what I'm doing and everything. But I think it's just really important that, that happens.
Right. Even if we take a couple hours a week and shoot a video on YouTube doing
Yeah.
something in the shop or whatever, I think that would
Yeah.
be, something. Hey, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and I appreciate you coming on. Um, I tell you, the greatest name in the sign industry, Mars Bravo.
Thank you so
So,
much, Eric. It was so
yeah.
much fun. I can't wait to be back here with you.
All right.
And let's stay in touch.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.